Apache woman was caught in a trap, then heard a hunter's footsteps coming closer through the wild. She had learned from a very young age that the land could be both a friend and an enemy. The desert did not forgive mistakes, and the mountains did not care about fear. For the Apache people, survival was not a story told around a fire, it was daily life. Every step taken outside the safety of the camp required focus, patience, and respect for nature. This was especially true for her. She was known among her people as a quiet but capable woman. She did not speak more than needed, but when she did, her words were thoughtful. She understood the land in ways that could not be taught quickly. Her mother had walked these same paths before her, and her grandmother before that. The ground, the wind, the shape of the rocks, all of it carried meaning. On this particular morning, the sun rose gently over the dry hills, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pale blue. The air was cool, but she knew the heat would come quickly. She prepared carefully before leaving the camp. She carried a small woven bag for herbs and roots, a simple tool for digging, and a knife she kept more for utility than defense. Everything she carried had a purpose. Nothing was extra. She was gathering food and medicine for her family and for others in the camp. This was her role, and she took it seriously. The elders depended on her knowledge, and the children depended on what she brought back. Each journey mattered. As she walked, her eyes scanned the ground and the distance ahead. She noticed small changes, the way birds moved, the silence of insects, the marks left in the dirt. These signs told her whether an area was safe or not. Lately, she had been more careful than ever. The world beyond their community was changing. Outsiders had begun to move through the land more often. Some were travelers, some were hunters, and others had intentions that were not always clear. She had heard stories of traps placed without warning. Stories of land no longer respected. These stories were not told to scare people, but to prepare them. Still, no amount of preparation could remove all risk. She moved deeper into the area she knew well, a place where certain plants grew near a narrow path between rocks. She had walked this path many times before. Her feet followed it naturally, almost without thought, but her mind remained alert. She paused often, listening. The wind carried familiar sounds, distant birds, the soft movement of leaves, the faint rustle of small animals. Nothing seemed out of place. She knelt to examine the ground, spotting a plant she recognized instantly. It was one that helped with pain and fever, valuable to the camp. Carefully, she began to dig around its roots. As she worked, her thoughts drifted briefly to her family. She thought of her younger brother, still learning how to track animals. She thought of her mother, whose hands were no longer as steady as they once were. This gathering trip was more than a task, it was a responsibility. After collecting what she needed, she stood and adjusted the strap of her bag. She decided to take a slightly different route back, one that curved around a cluster of trees. It was a small change, one she had made many times before. At the time, it felt natural. The land looked the same as it always had, but something unseen waited ahead. As she walked, her foot came down in a place that seemed solid. There was no warning sound, no visible sign. In a sudden moment, everything changed. The ground beneath her shifted in a way that felt wrong, and before her mind could fully understand what was happening, she felt a sharp, shocking force around her leg. Her body reacted instantly. She gasped and tried to pull back, but her movement was stopped. Confusion flooded her thoughts. She looked down, her heart racing, and saw something she had only heard about in stories. A trap. It was hidden carefully, placed by someone who knew how to disguise it. Her leg was caught, held tightly. The pain was strong, but even stronger was the fear that followed. She had not seen it. She had not smelled it. The land had not warned her in time. She forced herself to breathe slowly. Panic would not help her. Panic could make everything worse. She reminded herself of what she had been taught. Stay aware, stay calm, think. She tested her balance, careful not to move too much. Every small shift reminded her that she was not free. Her mind worked quickly, trying to understand how long the trap had been there and who might return to check it. The stories she had heard echoed in her thoughts. She knew she was far enough from camp that no one would hear her if she called out. And even if someone did, she did not know who might answer. The land was no longer only theirs. She looked around, memorizing her surroundings. The trees, the rocks, the shadows cast by the rising sun. Time suddenly felt heavier. Every passing moment mattered. Despite the fear, another feeling rose within her, determination. She had survived harsh seasons, long journeys, and loss. She had learned from the strongest people she knew. This moment, as terrifying as it was, would not take her spirit easily. She pressed her lips together and focused on the present. She needed to stay alert. She needed to listen. She needed to prepare for whatever might come next. The land around her remained quiet, but she knew that silence did not always mean safety. Somewhere beyond her sight, the world continued to move. And she was no longer just a woman gathering plants. She was a woman caught between danger and survival. This was only the beginning. Time moved differently after she realized she could not step away. The world that had felt wide and open only moments before now seemed small and heavy. The sound of her own breathing felt loud in her ears, and she had to slow it down so it would not betray her presence to anyone nearby. She looked down again, forcing herself not to focus only on the pain. The device holding her leg was made of cold metal, shaped and hidden with care. It was not placed by accident. Someone had chosen this spot, knowing animals passed through here often. She wondered how many days it had been waiting, silent and patient, before she stepped into its reach. She gently tested the ground with her free foot, trying to find a stable position. Every movement had to be careful. The desert was quiet, but quiet did not mean empty. She knew better than to believe that. Her first thought was escape. That was always the first thought. She studied the way the metal held her, how tightly it pressed where there might be space. She remembered watching elders repair tools and listening as they explained how things were built. Understanding how something worked often showed how it could be undone. She reached down slowly, her fingers brushing against the dry dirt near the trap. The metal was firm and unforgiving. It did not respond to her careful touch. She pulled her hand back, disappointed but not defeated. This was not the time for rushing. Rushing led to mistakes. The sun continued to rise, and with it came warmth. Sweat formed on her skin, not only from the heat, but from the fear she was trying to keep under control. She adjusted her position again, wincing quietly. Her bag had fallen to the ground nearby, its contents scattered. Plants she had gathered so carefully now lay forgotten, mixing with dust. She thought about calling out just once. The idea crossed her mind and then passed. Sound traveled far in the open land, but it did not choose who would hear it. She did not know who might be close enough to respond, and that uncertainty made silence the safer choice. Instead, she focused on listening. At first, there was nothing unusual. The wind moved gently through the trees. A bird called somewhere in the distance. These were sounds she knew well. They told her the land was still breathing, still alive. Then she noticed something small but important. The birds grew quieter. One by one, their sounds faded. It was subtle, the kind of change most people would miss, but she had learned to notice such things. Animals sensed danger long before humans did. Her body became still. Even her thoughts slowed as she listened harder. The silence was not complete, but it was different, heavier. That was when she heard it, a faint sound almost lost beneath the wind, a soft pressure against the ground, not an animal. The rhythm was wrong, too steady, too careful, footsteps. They were far away at first, but they were real. Her heart beat faster, and she had to remind herself again to stay calm. Panic would only make noise. Noise would only make things worse. She shifted slightly, pulling her body closer to the shadow of a nearby tree. The movement sent a sharp reminder through her leg, but she did not react outwardly. She pressed her lips together and focused on control. The land had taught her that strength was often quiet. The footsteps came again, closer this time. Whoever it was moved with purpose, not wandering. This person knew where they were going. Her thoughts raced. If the person was checking the trap, they would come directly toward her. If they were passing through, they might not notice her at all. She needed to become part of the land, just another shape among rocks and trees. She reached for dirt and gently brushed it over the metal near her leg, trying to dull its shine. The sun could catch on smooth surfaces, and light could reveal what shadows hid. Every small action mattered. The footsteps paused. Her breath stopped. She listened so closely that she could hear her own heartbeat. Seconds stretched long and uncomfortable. She wondered if the person had sensed something the same way she had sensed change earlier. She remained still, trusting that patience might protect her. Then the footsteps started again, closer than before. She could now hear more than just movement. There was the faint sound of clothing shifting, of something carried at the person's side. She did not lift her head, but she adjusted her focus, using her ears instead of her eyes. She thought of the stories told by the fire at night. Stories of people who had been taken by surprise, of moments where one choice made the difference between returning home and never being seen again. Those stories were never told for drama. They were warnings. She reminded herself who she was. She was not helpless. She was injured, yes, but she was still aware, still thinking, still alive. The person stopped again, this time very close. She could feel their presence even without seeing them. The air felt different, as if it carried the weight of another human nearby. She stayed low, her body tense but controlled. Her hand found the handle of her small knife, not lifting it, just resting there. It was not meant for a fight, but it gave her a sense of readiness. Sometimes readiness alone changed how a moment unfolded. The person shifted their weight. She could hear it clearly now. They were looking around. Her mind searched for options. If she was seen, what could she do? If she stayed hidden, how long could she remain like this? The sun would continue to climb. The heat would grow stronger. Time was not on her side. She noticed something else then. The footsteps did not move directly toward her. They circled, slow and careful, as if the person was inspecting the area rather than rushing to the trap. That gave her a small measure of hope. She pressed herself closer to the ground, letting the shadows cover her face. Her clothing blended with the colors of the land, something her people had always understood. The earth was not just a place to walk on, it was a place to learn from. The person moved a few steps away, then stopped again. She heard a sound like metal touching metal, faint but clear enough. The trap. They were checking it. Her heart pounded. This was the moment everything balanced on. She stayed silent. She did not move. She did not let fear guide her actions. She trusted the lessons passed down to her through generations. When danger is close, stillness can be strength. The seconds passed slowly. The person seemed distracted, perhaps adjusting something nearby. She used that moment to study the ground around her, memorizing every detail. If a chance came, even a small one, she needed to be ready. Finally, the footsteps moved again, not toward her but away. Slowly at first, then steadily. The sounds faded, carried off by the wind and distance. She did not relax right away. She waited, listening carefully until the land returned to its normal rhythm. Only when the birds began to sing again did she allow herself a quiet breath of relief. The danger had not ended, but she had survived this moment. She looked down at her trapped leg again, her determination returning stronger than before. She was still caught, still injured, but she was not discovered. That mattered. She knew now that someone was close enough to return. Time had become even more precious. With renewed focus, she began to think again, not about fear, but about escape. After the footsteps faded, the quiet felt different than before. It was no longer calm. It was tense, like the land itself was holding its breath. She remained still for a long time, not trusting the silence right away. Experience had taught her that danger sometimes waited just beyond the moment you thought it had passed. Her body ached from staying in the same position. The trapped leg felt heavy and numb in places, sharp in others. She shifted just a little, enough to ease the strain without making noise. Each movement was slow and planned. She listened between every motion, making sure the land stayed quiet. Her thoughts returned to the person she had heard. Whoever it was, they knew this area. They had placed the device carefully and returned to check it. That meant they could come back again. She could not wait for help. She could not wait for chance. If she wanted to survive, she would have to rely on herself. She studied the metal again, this time with more focus. The earlier fear had settled into something steadier. Clear thinking replaced panic. She touched the edges, feeling where the pressure was strongest and where it eased slightly. Pain came with every attempt, but she accepted it as part of the moment. Fighting pain only made it louder. She remembered lessons from long ago, spoken by an elder while repairing a broken tool. "Nothing made by hands is without weakness," he had said. At the time, she had not fully understood. Now those words returned with meaning. She searched the ground around her with her free hand, brushing aside dust and small stones. She needed something solid, something strong enough to use as leverage. Her fingers closed around a flat rock, rough and heavy. It was not perfect, but it was something. She paused again, listening. The land answered with only wind and distant movement. No footsteps, no voices, just the slow passing of time. She positioned the rock carefully, testing its weight. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from effort and pain. She took a deep breath and pressed the rock against part of the metal where it curved. She did not force it yet. She simply tested, learning how it responded. The metal did not move, but it made a sound, quiet, sharp, unnatural in the stillness. She froze immediately. Sound carried far in open land. She waited, heart racing, until she was sure no one was near. When nothing followed, she continued, more carefully this time. She adjusted the angle, using knowledge more than strength. The metal resisted, but she felt something shift just a little. Hope sparked inside her, small but powerful. She worked slowly, resting often. The sun climbed higher, warming her skin. Sweat ran down her face and dust stuck to it. Her mouth felt dry and thirst began to creep in. Still, she continued. Stopping completely was not an option. Between efforts, her thoughts wandered to her people. She imagined the camp as it would be now, smoke rising, voices mixing, children moving between tents. They would expect her back before the sun reached its highest point. When she did not return, they would worry. But worry alone could not find her here. That thought hurt more than the metal around her leg. She pushed it aside and focused again. This moment required all of her attention. She pressed the rock once more, harder now. Pain surged sharp and bright, but she held on. She did not cry out. She would not give the land a sound it could carry to the wrong ears. The metal shifted again. This time it was clear. Not enough to free her, but enough to tell her she was not helpless. She adjusted her grip and tried a different angle. Her arms burned with effort. Her trapped leg trembled. She bit down on the inside of her cheek to stay focused. The world narrowed to the sound of her breathing and the feel of metal beneath her hands. Then, suddenly, the pressure eased slightly. She stopped, stunned. She tested it carefully, afraid to believe it too soon. Her leg was still held, but not as tightly as before. The opening was small, but it was there. Her heart lifted, then immediately slowed again as she reminded herself not to rush. Rushing now could undo everything. She worked patiently, widening the space little by little. Time passed in fragments. She lost track of how long she had been there. The sun shifted, shadows moved, but she stayed focused on the task. At last, she felt it. Her leg slipped free, slowly, painfully, but unmistakably. For a moment, she could not move. Relief washed over her so strongly it made her dizzy. She leaned forward, resting her hands on the ground, breathing deeply. She was free, but not safe yet. Her leg did not respond the way she wanted it to. It felt weak, unfamiliar. She tested it carefully, placing just a little weight on it. Pain flared, but she remained standing, supported by a nearby tree. She knew she could not stay here. Freedom meant nothing if she was found moments later. She looked around quickly, memorizing the area one last time. The trap remained where it was, silent again, waiting for something else. She stepped away from it, careful not to leave obvious signs of her struggle. Moving slowly, she began to make her way toward thicker ground where trees and rocks would offer cover. Each step was measured. She leaned on branches, paused often, and listened constantly. Every sound made her alert. A bird lifting suddenly, wind shifting direction. Her senses were stretched thin, but they guided her well. As she moved, her thoughts returned briefly to the person who had checked the trap earlier. They would return. When they did, they would find it empty. That might confuse them. It might slow them. That small advantage mattered. She followed a path she knew well, one that curved away from open space and into uneven terrain. It was harder to walk, especially with her injured leg, but it offered safety. Tracks were harder to follow there. Sound did not travel as far. Her strength faded as she went, but her determination grew stronger. Each step took her farther from the place where she had been helpless. Each step was a quiet victory. At one point, she had to stop completely, crouching behind a cluster of rocks as dizziness passed over her. She closed her eyes and focused on breathing. She pressed her palm into the earth, grounding herself. The land had tested her, but it was also helping her now. When she opened her eyes, the world steadied. She stood again and continued, slower now but steady. She did not know how far she would make it before night. She did not know if help would find her or if she would have to find her way alone. What she did know was this: she was still moving. She was still thinking. She was still alive. And that meant the story was not over. She moved deeper into the uneven land, where the ground rose and fell without warning. Rocks pressed through the thin soil, and low trees twisted in shapes formed by years of wind. This place demanded care even from someone uninjured. For her, every step required full attention. Her leg protested with each movement. Sometimes the pain was sharp, sometimes dull, but it was always there. She learned quickly how to place her foot in a way that hurt less. She leaned on branches and stones, using the land as support. The land, which had betrayed her earlier, now became her guide again. She paused often, not only to rest, but to listen. The memory of footsteps stayed close in her mind. Even though she had escaped the trap, she knew the danger had not ended. The person who placed it would return. When they discovered it empty, questions would follow. Questions could lead to searching. She chose her path carefully, avoiding open ground. She followed curves and shadows, places where sound was broken and movement was hidden. Her people had always known how to travel without leaving clear signs. Now that knowledge mattered more than ever. The sun moved higher, and the heat settled heavily on her shoulders. Her mouth felt dry and her strength began to fade. She checked her small bag. Most of its contents were gone, spilled earlier near the trap. But she still carried one thing of value, a small bundle of dried leaves used to calm the body and mind. She placed a bit in her mouth and chewed slowly. The bitter taste was familiar, grounding. As she continued, she noticed something that made her stop instantly. A sound, not footsteps, not yet, but a disturbance. A bird took flight suddenly from nearby brush. That kind of movement rarely happened without reason. Her body reacted before her thoughts did. She lowered herself behind a rock, holding still. She listened. At first, there was nothing else. Then faintly she heard movement, not rushing, careful, searching. Her heart tightened. Whoever it was had changed direction. They were closer than she liked. She stayed low, pulling her clothing close to her body. Her breath slowed, quiet, and controlled. She reminded herself again that fear could not guide her, only awareness. The sounds grew clearer. A pause, then another step. The person was nearby, moving through the land as someone experienced would. That worried her. This was not a careless traveler. This was someone paying attention. She scanned her surroundings without moving her head. The rocks formed a narrow break in the land, creating a shallow dip. If she stayed still, she might remain unseen. If she moved now, the sound could give her away. Her leg trembled slightly. She pressed her hand against it, steadying herself. She focused on the ground in front of her, on the smell of earth and dry leaves. She became part of the stillness. The footsteps stopped. Time stretched again, thin and fragile. She could hear the person breathing now, not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel. She sensed their presence like a weight in the air. She wondered if they had noticed the broken pattern of the trap earlier, if they were following signs she could not see. Her thoughts went to her family once more, not with sadness this time, but with strength. She had learned from them. She carried them with her. That mattered. A shape moved between the trees. She did not look directly, but she saw it from the corner of her eye. The person stood still, scanning the land. Their posture told her they were unsure. That was important. She stayed hidden, trusting that uncertainty would protect her. Moments passed. The person shifted position, then turned slightly away. They took a few slow steps in another direction, stopping again to look back. She did not move. Finally, the footsteps faded, not fast, but steady. The sounds blended back into the land, wind through leaves, the quiet movement of small animals returning. She waited long after the sounds were gone. She counted her breaths. She let her muscles loosen slowly. Only when she was certain did she move again. She did not follow the same path as before. She angled away, choosing a route that led through denser ground. It was harder to walk there, but it offered protection. Her leg dragged slightly now, and she adjusted her pace. Survival was not about speed. It was about staying unseen. As the sun began to lower, the light softened. Shadows grew longer. This time of day could be dangerous, but it could also help. Movement was easier to hide when light was uneven. She reached a narrow stream, its water shallow but clear. She knelt carefully and rinsed her hands, then brought water to her mouth. It was cool and tasted of stone and earth. Strength returned to her slowly. She knew she could not stay long. Streams were traveled paths. She moved along it briefly, then stepped away, breaking her trail. She climbed higher ground, where the wind erased signs more easily. Her body grew tired, but her mind stayed sharp. She began to recognize landmarks now, rock shapes, tree patterns. She was closer to familiar territory. That knowledge warmed her more than the fading sun. Still, she remained cautious. Danger did not disappear simply because hope returned. As evening approached, she found a place where the land folded inward, forming a small, sheltered space between rocks. It was not a camp, not a place to stay long, but it offered a moment of safety. She lowered herself carefully and rested. She checked her leg. It was swollen and sore, but she could still move it. She cleaned it gently with water from her pouch and pressed a crushed leaf against it, one she recognized as helpful for easing discomfort. Her hands moved with practiced care. As she worked, she listened to the land one more time. It felt calmer now, balanced. She allowed herself a moment of rest, not sleep, just stillness. She leaned back and closed her eyes briefly, breathing in the familiar scent of dust and plants. She had faced fear and made it through, not by force but by patience, awareness, and respect for the land. When she opened her eyes, the sky had begun to change color. Night would come soon. She knew she had one more challenge ahead, reaching her people before darkness fully settled. But she also knew something else now. She could survive this. She stood again, steadying herself, and began to move forward. The light in the sky faded slowly, turning from warm gold to soft gray. Night did not arrive all at once. It came in quiet steps, like everything else in the land. She moved carefully as the shadows grew longer, aware that darkness could hide danger as easily as it could hide her. Her leg was stiff now, tired from the long effort. Each step felt heavier than the last, but stopping for too long was not an option. She knew these lands well enough to travel by memory when needed. The shapes of hills, the line of distant rocks, and the direction of the wind all guided her forward. As the air cooled, her breathing became easier. The heat of the day had drained her strength, but the night gave some of it back. She adjusted her pace, steady and slow, listening with every step. The land spoke differently at night, and she paid attention to every change. She reached higher ground where the earth sloped gently downward toward familiar territory. From here, she could recognize the outline of a ridge near her people's camp. It was still far, but seeing it filled her with quiet relief. She was no longer lost. She was on her way home. She paused to rest one last time, leaning against a large stone that still held some warmth from the sun. Her body needed the pause, and she allowed it, but she did not let her focus drift. Even now, she remained alert. As she rested, her thoughts moved back over the day. The morning that had begun like so many others. The sudden change, the fear, the silence, the patience it had taken to survive each moment. She did not see herself as brave. She saw herself as prepared. That was the way her people understood strength. After a short rest, she stood again. Her movements were slower now, but more confident. Each step brought her closer to safety. The sounds of the night surrounded her. Insects called softly. A distant animal moved through brush. These sounds no longer filled her with fear. They were familiar, comforting in their own way. The land had returned to balance. As she walked, she began to see signs left by her people, small markers only they would notice. A stone placed a certain way, a branch bent carefully. These signs told her she was close. Her heart lifted and her pace quickened slightly despite the pain. Soon she saw the faint glow of firelight in the distance. It flickered gently, steady and warm. That light meant voices, safety, and care. It meant she had made it. She stopped at the edge of the camp area, not wanting to rush in. She listened first, just as she always had. The sounds were right, calm voices, the crackle of fire, the soft movement of people settling in for the night. When she stepped forward, someone noticed her immediately. A voice called out, surprised, then relieved. Others turned. She felt hands reach for her, steadying her as she leaned slightly from exhaustion. They guided her to sit near the fire. The warmth wrapped around her, and only then did she allow herself to fully relax. The tension she had carried all day slowly eased from her shoulders. Water was brought to her. She drank deeply, grateful beyond words. Gentle hands examined her leg, careful and skilled. There was concern, but also reassurance. She was home. She was safe. She spoke quietly, telling them what had happened. She did not exaggerate. She did not hide the truth. The people listened closely, their faces serious. They understood what her experience meant, not just for her, but for everyone. That night, as the camp settled, elders spoke in low voices. Plans were made. Paths would be avoided. Warnings would be shared. Knowledge, once again, would protect the people. She rested near the fire, wrapped in a blanket, her body finally able to recover. Pain still lingered, but it no longer felt overwhelming. It was something she could heal from. As she lay there, watching sparks rise into the dark sky, she thought about the land. It had tested her, but it had also carried her through. She felt no anger toward it, only respect. The next days would bring healing. She would walk again without pain. She would return to gathering, to caring for her family, to living her life. But she would never forget this journey, not because of fear, but because of what it taught her. She had faced uncertainty alone and survived by trusting her knowledge, her patience, and the lessons passed down through generations. That strength was not loud. It did not demand attention. It simply endured. As sleep finally came, her breathing slow, and even the fire continued to burn steadily beside her. The land rested too, quiet and watchful as it always was. And the story of that day became part of her, not as a tale of danger, but as a reminder of resilience, awareness, and the unbreakable bond between a person and the world they know by heart.